The hiss of the espresso machine is a familiar soundtrack to my mornings. I'm Daniel, 28, and if my life were a font, it'd be something clean and minimalist, but with a slightly shaky baseline. I'm a graphic designer, which means I spend my days trying to make things look good, even when they're not. Lately, that feels like a metaphor for my relationship with Melissa. I'm sitting in the daily grind, my usual coffee spot, nursing a lukewarm latte and staring out at the drizzle that's decided to make today a bit gloomier. My sketchbook is open on the table, but the pages are blank. My mind, however, is anything but. It's replaying a highlight reel of the last 18 months, a film I've seen too many times, searching for the exact moment the plot went sideways. We met at a gallery opening. My friend Liam was showcasing his chaotic, brilliant sculptures. I was there for moral support, feeling a bit like a spare part among the artsy crowd. Then I saw her. Melissa. She was laughing, a bright, genuine sound that cut through the polite murmurs of the room. She was standing by one of Liam's more challenging pieces. A twisted metal thing that looked like it had lost a fight with a bigger twisted metal thing. She had this way of tilting her head when she was intrigued, and her eyes, a warm hazel, seemed to sparkle under the gallery lights. I'm not usually the guy who makes the first move. My confidence is more of a flickering candle than a steady flame. But something about her, maybe the way she didn't seem to be taking the art too seriously, or maybe just the wine I'd had, propelled me forward. "Interesting piece, isn't it?" I'd said, cringing internally at my less-than-stellar opening line. She turned, and that smile hit me full force. "It's expressive," she'd replied, a playful glint in her eye. "I'm Melissa. Daniel." We talked for what felt like hours that night, about everything and nothing. Art, movies, our mutual dislike for olives, our dreams. She was a marketing exec, ambitious and sharp, but with a soft, almost vulnerable side that drew me in. The connection felt real, electric. Like finding a missing piece you didn't even know you were looking for. Those first few weeks were a blur of late-night talks, shared takeout, and the kind of easy laughter that makes your stomach ache, in the best way. I thought, this is it. This is the kind of relationship people write songs about. Then, the first whisper of him. Trevor, her ex. It was subtle at first, a casual mention here and there. "Oh, Trevor used to love this band," or "Trevor had a shirt just like that." I didn't think much of it. Everyone has a past, right? It was just reminiscing. Harmless. I even made a mental note to be understanding. After all, a long-term relationship, which theirs apparently was, leaves echoes. I remember one evening we were trying out a new Italian place. I was rambling on about some new design software I was excited about, probably a bit too enthusiastically. She was listening, or so I thought, but then she said, "Trevor was always so good at explaining techie stuff. He made it sound so simple." A tiny pinprick. I remember feeling a little deflated, but I brushed it off. She didn't mean anything by it. It was just a thought, a fleeting comparison. People do that. I'm generally an introspective guy. I think a lot. Maybe too much. I analyze things, break them down. It's part of my job, part of who I am, and I've always had a bit of a self-deprecating humor to get me through the awkward bits of life. So when these little mentions of Trevor started to pop up, I'd make a joke in my head. "Ah, the ghost of boyfriends past," or "Cue the Trevor tribute hour." It was my way of deflecting, of not letting it get to me. Because honestly, I was falling for Melissa. Hard. And I didn't want anything to spoil it. The latte is cold now. I take a final bitter sip. My phone buzzes on the table. A text. Melissa. "Dinner tonight. 7, that little Thai place you like?" My stomach does a little flip. A mix of hope and something else. Trepidation? Yeah, that's the word. I type back a quick "sounds good," The smiley face feels like a lie. I want it to be good. I really, really do. But there's a nagging voice in the back of my head, the one that's been getting louder lately, wondering if tonight's dinner will come with a side of Trevor. That dinner at the Thai place, the one I supposedly liked, was an early turning point, though I didn't fully recognize it then. I'd chosen it because it was new, different from our usual spots. I wanted to create our places, our memories. We were seated, perusing the menus, when she said it. You know, Trevor always knew exactly what to order here without even looking at the menu. He had a favorite, the Panang curry. Said it was the best in the city. I remember staring at the laminated menu, the colorful pictures of food suddenly looking bland. Here? But we'd never been here together. How could Trevor know the menu by heart at a place neither of us had frequented? My internal monologue kicked in, a frantic attempt to rationalize. Maybe she's confused. Maybe she meant another Thai place. Or maybe Trevor is some kind of culinary psychic. I just nodded, mumbled something about the green curry sounding good, and tried to steer the conversation back to her day at work. But the seed was planted. A tiny, uncomfortable seed of doubt. It was like a tap had been turned on, slowly at first, then with increasing pressure. The comparisons weren't just casual mentions anymore. They started to feel like yardsticks against which I was constantly being measured, and, invariably, falling short. A few weeks later, we were at a multiplex, waiting for a movie to start. I'd bought a large popcorn to share, my usual move. Trevor always got his own popcorn, she remarked, reaching for a handful. He said he didn't like sharing food. He was very particular about his snacks. I remember looking at the giant tub of popcorn in my lap, suddenly feeling a bit foolish, a bit juvenile for wanting to share. Okay, so I'm the guy who shares popcorn. Is that a crime? My internal lawyer was always ready to jump to my defense, at least in my head. My best friend Ava noticed it before I was willing to admit it to myself. Ava and I go way back to college. She's a photographer, sharp as a tack, with an uncanny ability to see through people's BS. We were having our weekly catch-up coffee. Yes, I drink a lot of coffee. So, how's things with Melissa? Ava asked, stirring her cappuccino with a little too much vigor. Good, yeah, really good, I said, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. Ava raised an eyebrow. Just good? Because last week you mentioned she said Trevor wouldn't have worn that shirt you bought. I winced internally. I'd forgotten I'd told her that. Oh, that. It was just an offhand comment. She didn't mean anything by it. Daniel, Ava said, her voice gentle but firm. She mentions this Trevor guy a lot. And it's never, oh, Trevor was a disaster, thank God I met you. It's always something he did better, or knew better, or was better at. No, it's not like that, I protested, feeling a flush creep up my neck. She's just, processing her past. It was a long relationship. Deep down, a part of me knew Ava was right. But admitting it felt like admitting something was fundamentally wrong with Melissa, or worse, with me for not being Trevor. The most painful comparison, the one that really twisted the knife, happened during a weekend trip we'd planned. It was supposed to be romantic, a little cabin by a lake, a break from the city. I'd spent weeks looking for the perfect spot. I'd even packed a fancy bottle of wine and some ingredients to cook her favorite pasta. The first evening, we were sitting on the small porch, the sun setting over the water, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It should have been perfect. I reached for her hand. This is beautiful, isn't it? I said, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in a while. She sighed, a soft, almost melancholic sound. It is. Trevor took me to a place like this once, up in the mountains. The view was breathtaking. He had this amazing sense for finding these hidden gems. And just like that, the magic evaporated. The beautiful sunset suddenly felt ordinary. My carefully planned romantic gesture felt inadequate. I pulled my hand back, a cold knot forming in my stomach. All I could think was, even here? Even now? Later that night, after a stilted dinner where I burned the garlic and the conversation felt forced, I tried to talk to her about it. I had to. "Melissa," I began, my voice sounding tight even to my own ears. "Can I ask you something?" She was scrolling through her phone, probably looking at pictures of Trevor's breathtaking mountain view. "Hmm?" "It's just, you mention Trevor a lot. And sometimes it feels like you're comparing me to him." There, I'd said it. The words hung in the air, heavy and awkward. She finally looked up, a frown creasing her forehead. "What are you talking about?" "Like tonight with the cabin, and the other day with the popcorn. It happens pretty often." She let out a short, almost dismissive laugh. "Oh, Daniel, you're being too sensitive. I'm just telling stories about my past. Everyone does that. It doesn't mean anything." She reached out and patted my arm, a gesture that felt more patronizing than comforting. "Don't be insecure." Insecure. That word stung. Was I being insecure? Was I overthinking things? Her dismissal, so quick and complete, made me doubt myself. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was just being too sensitive. So I did what I always did when I felt inadequate. I tried harder. I became Daniel 2.0 now with extra effort. I tried to anticipate her needs, to be more decisive, to plan more impressive dates. I researched restaurants Trevor might have approved of. I listened to music he supposedly liked. I started to feel like I was auditioning for a role I was never going to get, the role of a man who wasn't me. I thought, if I could just be a little more like him, a little more what she seemed to want, then the comparisons would stop. Then she'd see me. Meanwhile, life outside the Melissa Trevor vortex continued. At work, I was assigned a new, high-profile project rebranding a local arts foundation. It was a big deal, a chance to really make a mark. The client lead was a woman named Eliza, who I'd only interacted with via email so far. The project was challenging, demanding, but in a good way. It was a space where my ideas were valued, where my creativity was the point, not a flaw. It became a small, quiet refuge, but back in my personal life, the pattern persisted. I was becoming an expert at spotting the comparisons, at bracing myself for them. But I was still making excuses. She's just comfortable with me. That's why she shares so much. It's a hard habit to break after a long relationship. Maybe if I just love her enough, it'll fade away. I was deep in denial, clinging to the memory of those first few blissful months, hoping we could find our way back. I just didn't realize that the path back was blocked by the towering shadow of a man I'd never met. 6 months, half a year. That's how long I'd been trying to be a better version of Daniel, a version that might, just might, measure up. The initial excitement of the relationship had long since curdled into a dull, persistent anxiety. The comparisons hadn't stopped. If anything, they'd become more ingrained in our dynamic, like a recurring, unwelcome theme song. The dinner with Melissa's friends was a particular low point. I'd met them a couple of times before, a clique that seemed to revolve around Melissa, or perhaps the memory of Melissa and Trevor. They were polite enough, but there was always an undercurrent, a sense that I was the stand-in, the understudy. We were at a trendy new tapas restaurant, the kind of place where the music is a bit too loud and the portions a bit too small. Sarah, Melissa's closest friend, was telling a story about a disastrous karaoke night from years ago. "And then," Sarah said, her voice rising dramatically, "Trevor gets up on stage. He hadn't sung a note all night, just been his usual charming self, making everyone laugh. and he belts out this perfect Bon Jovi. Perfect! The whole bar went wild. He was always the life of every party. She looked at Melissa, then gave me a brief, almost pitying glance. Melissa chimed in, laughing. "Oh God, I remember that. And then Daniel here, on our first karaoke outing, he picked, what was it, honey? That obscure indie song no one knew?" She squeezed my arm, but it felt less like affection, and more like a warning not to look too wounded. He's more of a quiet, thoughtful type, not exactly a crowd pleaser like Trevor. The table chuckled politely. I forced a smile, my face feeling stiff. Quiet, thoughtful type. It sounded like a euphemism for boring, un-Trevor. My insides were churning, resentment, a bitter, corrosive feeling, was starting to eat away at what little self-worth I had left. I wanted to say something, to defend myself, but what was the point? They wouldn't get it, or worse, they'd agree with Melissa. I was just being sensitive. That night, the simmering resentment boiled over. "Why did you do that?" I asked, once we were back in the car, the silence thick with unspoken words. "Do what?" Melissa feigned innocence, staring out the window. "At dinner, with your friends, comparing me to Trevor. Again." My voice was tight, laced with an anger I rarely showed. "Oh, for God's sake, Daniel, are we back to this?" She turned to me, her eyes flashing. "It was a story, a funny story. My friends love Trevor. He was a big part of my life. You can't expect me to just erase my past." "I'm not asking you to erase your past, Melissa. I'm asking you to stop using it as a weapon against me. It's constant." "Trevor did this. Trevor said that. Trevor was so much better at—" "Do you have any idea how that makes me feel?" "A weapon? Don't be so dramatic," she scoffed. "I'm just being honest. If you're this insecure, maybe Ava's right about you." "Wait, Ava? What did Ava have to do with this?" "What did Ava say?" Melissa waved her hand dismissively. "Nothing. It doesn't matter. The point is you need to toughen up. Not everything is a personal attack." The argument raged on, a circular, frustrating dance we'd done before, but this time with more venom. Eventually, exhausted and hurt, I retreated. Melissa, perhaps sensing she'd pushed too far, softened. There was a brief period of improvement. Fewer Trevor mentions. More compliments aimed my way, a fragile truce. I clung to it, hoping this was the turning point. During this tense period, my work project became even more of a lifeline. The Arts Foundation rebranding was progressing well. I was working closely with the client, Eliza. She was smart, insightful, and incredibly passionate about the Foundation's mission. Our meetings were energizing. She'd listen intently to my ideas, ask challenging questions, and offer genuinely constructive feedback. There was a respect there, a professional admiration that felt good. She wasn't a love interest, not even a blip on that radar. My romantic life was a tangled mess I wasn't about to complicate further. But she was someone who saw my skills, who valued my contribution without any caveats or comparisons. It was a stark contrast to how I felt with Melissa. The constant erosion of my self-esteem was taking its toll. Ava, bless her directness, had suggested therapy a while back. "You've lost your spark, Daniel," she'd said. "You're walking on eggshells." At the time, I'd resisted. Therapy felt like admitting defeat. But after the dinner with Melissa's friends, after that particularly brutal argument, I knew I needed help. I found a therapist, Dr. Evans, a kind-faced woman with a calm demeanor. Our sessions were hard. I talked about Melissa, about Trevor, about the gnawing feeling of not being good enough. Dr. Evans listened patiently, helping me to unpack the layers of self-doubt that had accumulated. She didn't offer easy answers, but she gave me tools, perspectives. She helped me see that my feelings were valid, that I wasn't just being too sensitive. Then came Thanksgiving. We were at Melissa's parents' house. Her family was formal. Her dad, a stern, successful businessman, always made me feel like I was undergoing an unspoken evaluation. I tried to engage him in conversation, asking about his work, his hobbies. He was polite but distant. During dinner, the topic of investments came up. Melissa's dad was pontificating about the stock market. "Trevor always got along so well with my dad," Melissa announced to the table, a nostalgic smile on her face. They would talk for hours about investments. Trevor was so savvy with money. He really understood that world. She then turned to me. "Daniel's more on the creative side, Dad. Less numbers, more colors." She said it with a little laugh, as if it were a cute, harmless quirk. Her dad grunted, a sound that could have meant anything but felt distinctly unimpressed. I looked down at my plate of turkey and stuffing, my appetite gone. The familiar sting, the feeling of being diminished, of being publicly highlighted as less than. It was the casualness of it that hurt the most. As if my feelings, my worth, were just an afterthought. This wasn't just a comparison. It was a public declaration of my perceived inadequacy in a field her father clearly valued. And Trevor, the ghost of perfection, excelled there too. Of course he did. Something inside me snapped, not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, decisive way. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't sit there and be dissected and found wanting over and over again. I placed my napkin on the table. "Excuse me," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm not feeling very well. I think I need to get some air." Melissa looked surprised, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Daniel, are you okay?" I didn't look at her. I couldn't. "I'll be fine. I need to go." I walked out of the dining room, through the house, and out the front door, leaving the murmur of confused conversation behind me. The cold November air hit my face, a welcome shock. I stood on the porch, taking deep breaths, trying to quell the storm inside me. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't go back in there. I couldn't keep living like this. The foundation of our relationship, already riddled with cracks, felt like it was crumbling beneath my feet. And for the first time, I seriously questioned if it was worth saving. The drive home from Melissa's parents' house that Thanksgiving was a silent, frigid affair. I didn't try to explain. She didn't press. The unspoken had become a chasm between us. My early departure had been a statement, and we both knew it, though neither of us was ready to dissect its full meaning. In the weeks that followed, my disconnection from the relationship deepened. It was like watching a movie in a foreign language with no subtitles. I was present, but I didn't understand, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. The easy laughter, the comfortable silences, the shared glances that once defined us were gone, replaced by a careful, almost choreographed politeness. We were two people sharing a space, but not a life. Christmas loomed, a festive monster of expectation. The pressure to find the perfect gift for Melissa felt immense, not because I wanted to shower her with affection, but because I was terrified of getting it wrong, of providing yet another opportunity for an unfavorable comparison to the ghost of Christmas past, aka Trevor. I spent hours online, in stores, racking my brain. What would Trevor get her? The thought was both ludicrous and deeply depressing. I eventually settled on a first edition of her favorite classic novel, beautifully bound, something I thought was thoughtful and personal. Christmas morning. She unwrapped it. Her smile was strained. "Oh," she said, tracing the gold lettering on the spine. "It's nice." Nice. The kiss of death. Later that day, after the awkwardness had festered for a few hours, she brought it up. "You know," she began, her tone carefully neutral, Trevor always knew exactly what I wanted without me having to tell him. He just got me. That year he got me those diamond earrings I'd only glanced at in a shop window weeks before. It was like he could read my mind. There it was, my thoughtful, carefully chosen gift, reduced to a clumsy second best. The dam inside me, the one I'd been so desperately trying to patch up, finally broke. "I can't do this anymore, Melissa," I said, the words tumbling out, raw and unfiltered. "I can't live up to him. I don't even want to try. I'm not Trevor. I'm never going to be Trevor. And I'm tired of feeling like I'm constantly failing because of it." The argument that followed was epic, a culmination of months of unspoken resentment and hurt. This time I didn't back down. I laid it all out, the constant comparisons, the way it made me feel, the erosion of my self-worth. "You're twisting things," she cried, defensive and angry. "I'm not trying to make you feel bad. Why are you always so insecure?" Insecure. That word again. But this time, it didn't sting as much. Dr. Evans' voice echoed in my head. "Your feelings are a reaction to your circumstances, Daniel. It's not insecurity to feel hurt when you are consistently made to feel inadequate." The argument ended, as they always did, with no real resolution, just exhaustion and a deeper sense of hopelessness. The next day I called Ava. I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't just tell me I was being sensitive. I met her at our usual coffee shop, the irony of its name. The daily grind, not lost on me. I poured it all out. The Thanksgiving dinner, the Christmas gift disaster, the constant soul-crushing comparisons. I didn't spare myself, admitting my own attempts to change, to be someone I wasn't, just to please her. Ava listened, her expression growing more concerned with every word. When I finally finished, drained and emotionally raw, she reached across the table and took my hand. "Daniel," she said, her voice soft but unwavering. "This isn't love. What you're describing, this is emotional abuse." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Emotional abuse, it sounded so dramatic, so serious. But as she started to explain, to connect the dots of Melissa's behavior, the constant criticism disguised as honesty, the undermining of my confidence, the gaslighting when I tried to express my hurt, a horrifying clarity began to emerge. It wasn't just about Trevor. It was about control. It was about her needing to feel superior, and me being the tool for that. "She's systematically dismantling your self-esteem, Daniel," Ava continued, "and you're letting her. You deserve to be with someone who builds you up, who loves you for you, not for who they wish you were, or who their ex was." Her words were a harsh but necessary wake-up call. For the first time, I started to see the dynamic for what it truly was, not as a flaw in me, but as a deeply unhealthy pattern in the relationship. My worth wasn't tied to how I measured up against Trevor. My worth was inherent. It was a revolutionary thought. Melissa's birthday was a few weeks later. She decided to have a dinner party, inviting a mix of our mutual friends and her old clique. I dreaded it, but I went. I had to see if anything had changed, if my outburst at Christmas had made any impact. It hadn't. Throughout the evening, Melissa, fueled by wine and the adoring audience of her friends, dropped comparison after comparison. "Oh, Daniel tried to make me that coq au vin Trevor used to make for my birthday once. It was an effort." Laughter. "Remember that surprise trip to Paris Trevor planned for my 25th? Daniel's idea of a surprise is finding a new filter on Instagram." More laughter. Each comment was a fresh stab, but this time something was different within me. The pain was still there, but it was mingled with a cold, hard anger and a growing sense of detachment. I watched her, really watched her, and I saw not the woman I'd fallen in love with, but someone who seemed to enjoy diminishing me, someone who needed an audience to validate her critiques. My inner realization crystallized. I deserve better than this. It was no longer a question, but a statement of fact. The final straw, the one that broke the camel's back with an almost audible snap, came a few days after the disastrous birthday dinner. We were having a rare, quiet evening at home. Or so I thought. Melissa was looking at her laptop, a thoughtful frown on her face. "You know, Daniel," she said, her voice casual, "I was thinking, your graphic design thing is nice, but it's not very stable, is it? All that freelance stress." I tensed. "It's my career, Melissa. I'm good at it. And the Arts Foundation project is going really well." I know, she said, waving a dismissive hand. "But Trevor, he's in finance. It's so much more secure, more ambitious. Have you ever thought about something like that? Something with a clearer path, more prestige?" There it was. Not just a comparison of personality or taste or romantic gestures, a suggestion that I change the very core of who I was, my passion, my livelihood. To be more like Trevor. To abandon my own path for one that mirrored his. In that moment, something in me settled. A profound, almost peaceful clarity. This wasn't just about her missing Trevor or her being insensitive. This was about her fundamentally not seeing me, not valuing me, not wanting me. She wanted a Trevor-shaped hole filled, and I was just the ill-fitting peg she was trying to hammer into it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and the love I'd felt, the desperate hope I'd clung to, was gone, replaced by a deep, weary sadness and a steely resolve. "No, Melissa," I said, my voice calm, devoid of the anger and hurt that had plagued me for so long. "I haven't thought about changing my career, because I love what I do, and I'm good at it." I stood up. "We need to talk." She looked up, surprised by the finality in my tone. "About what?" "About us," I said. "About the fact that there isn't an us anymore." The decision was made. There was no turning back. I was done giving her chances to compare me. I was done trying to be someone else. I was choosing me. The conversation wasn't a screaming match. There were no thrown objects, no dramatic storming out. It was quiet, almost painfully so. I sat on the edge of the sofa. She remained in her armchair, laptop still open, but forgotten. "I can't do this anymore, Melissa," I started. The words I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times, feeling both heavy and liberating. The constant comparisons, the feeling that I'm never good enough. It's not healthy, for either of us. She looked genuinely surprised, a flicker of disbelief in her eyes. "What are you talking about? We had a fight at Christmas, but I thought we were better." "Better?" I almost laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Melissa, you suggested I change my career to be more like Trevor. Just now. After months, no, over a year of me telling you how much it hurts when you compare us." Her face hardened. "Oh, here we go again. I was just being honest about my experiences. If you can't handle that, maybe Trevor was right about you being insecure." The mention of Trevor, even now, even as I was ending things, was like a reflex for her. But this time, his name, her accusation, it didn't have the same power. It was like a spell had been broken. "This isn't about insecurity, Melissa," I said, my voice firm, calm, a tone I hadn't realized I possessed until that moment. It was the voice of someone who had finally found his footing. "This is about respect. It's about being seen for who I am, not for who I'm not. And you haven't done that. Maybe you can't, but I can't live like this anymore." I told her I was moving out. I told her it was over. Her surprise gave way to a strange mix of anger, and a dismissiveness that was all too familiar. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "If you're going to be this sensitive, then maybe it's for the best." She tried to minimize her behavior, to paint me as the one with the problem, the one who couldn't handle her honesty. But the words just bounced off me. I'd heard them all before. They had no power anymore. The days that followed were a blur. Packing boxes, the logistics of separating two lives that had become intertwined. Each object I packed. A coffee mug she'd given me, a framed photo from early in our relationship, a book we'd both loved, was a tiny paper cut, a reminder of what I'd hoped for, and what had been lost. Once I was out, settled into a small, temporary apartment, the reality hit. Post-breakup depression isn't pretty. It's a gray, heavy blanket that smothers everything. There was a lot of staring at walls, a lot of replaying conversations in my head, a lot of second-guessing. Did I do the right thing? Was I too hasty? Could I have tried harder? The old tapes of self-doubt played on a loop. But this time I wasn't alone in my head. I had Ava, a rock of unwavering support. She'd call, she'd show up with takeout and bad movies, she'd listen without judgment as I processed the grief, the anger, the lingering confusion. My small circle of friends rallied too, offering distractions, shoulders to cry on, and much-needed reminders that there was a life beyond Melissa. Work became my sanctuary, my therapy. The Arts Foundation project was in full swing. It demanded my focus, my creativity. Pouring myself into it was a way to channel the turmoil, to create something positive out of the wreckage of my personal life. Eliza, the client, continued to be a beacon of professionalism and encouragement. Our interactions were solely about the project, but her quiet appreciation for my work was a balm to my bruised ego. She didn't know what I was going through, but her respect for my abilities was a lifeline. The first holidays alone were tough. Christmas, New Year's Eve, they were stark reminders of my newly single status. There were pangs of loneliness, moments when the silence in my little apartment felt deafening. But there was also a strange sense of liberation. No walking on eggshells, no bracing for the inevitable comparison, no pressure to be someone I wasn't. I could just be Daniel, flaws and all. Slowly, tentatively, I started to rediscover myself. The interests I'd suppressed, the parts of my personality I'd muted to try and fit Melissa's mold, began to re-emerge. I went to art exhibits she would have found boring. I listened to music that wasn't on Trevor's approved playlist. I spent a whole Saturday afternoon in a dusty old bookstore, losing myself in the smell of old paper and the promise of new stories, and bought a ridiculous, nerdy sci-fi novel just because I wanted to. It felt good. Like stretching after being cramped in a small space for too long. A few months after the breakup, Melissa called. An unknown number flashed on my screen, but I answered it anyway. Her voice was softer than I remembered, tinged with something that might have been regret. "Daniel, it's Melissa." A knot formed in my stomach. "Hi, Melissa." I was just thinking about you," she said. "I miss you. Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe we could try again. I promise, I'll be better." The old Daniel, the one desperate for her approval, would have jumped at that, would have seen it as a sign, a chance. But the Daniel who had spent months in therapy, who had painstakingly started to rebuild his sense of self, hesitated. I thought about it, really thought about it. Could she change? Could we change? Then I remembered the constant, grinding erosion of my spirit, the feeling of never being enough, the shadow of Trevor that loomed over everything. "Melissa," I said, my voice gentle but firm, "I appreciate you calling, but no, I don't think that's a good idea. For either of us. I've moved on, and I think it's time you did too." Hanging up the phone, I felt a profound sense of peace. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about protecting myself. It was about choosing a future where I didn't have to fight to be seen, where I didn't have to measure up to a ghost. It was the final, definitive click of a door closing on a painful chapter. And for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely optimistic about what lay ahead. 6 months. Half a year since the Melissa-shaped hole in my life had started to heal, slowly but surely, from the inside out. The gray blanket of post-breakup fog had lifted, replaced by a tentative then growing sense of clarity. Life had found a new rhythm, a quieter, more authentic cadence. The Arts Foundation rebranding project, my professional lifeline, was reaching its crescendo. The culmination was a big presentation to the Foundation's board and key stakeholders. It was my baby, a portfolio of work I was immensely proud of. A new logo, a revamped website, a whole new visual identity that I felt truly captured their mission. Eliza, my client contact at the Foundation, had been an incredible partner throughout the process. Our collaborative sessions had been the highlight of my work weeks. She had this amazing ability to articulate her vision while also being incredibly receptive to new ideas. She wasn't just a client. She'd become a work friend, someone I genuinely enjoyed brainstorming with. Leading up to the presentation, Eliza and I spent a lot of time together, fine-tuning every detail. Late nights fueled by coffee and a shared sense of purpose. During these sessions, our professional relationship began to subtly shift. We talked about more than just kerning and color palettes. We talked about our creative philosophies, our career aspirations, even our favorite obscure documentaries. There was an easy rapport, a mutual respect that went beyond the project. I started to notice things about Eliza. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about a piece of art that moved her. Her quick, intelligent wit. The genuine enthusiasm she had for my designs, not just as a client, but as someone who seemed to truly get them. "I've never met anyone who thinks about design the way you do, Daniel," she said one evening, as we were packing up after a particularly long session. "You have this way of finding the emotional core of a concept and translating it visually. It's really special." Her words landed differently than Melissa's ever had. There was no hidden barb, no implied comparison. It was just a genuine appreciation of my specific talent. It felt warm, validating. A stark, glaring contrast to the constant feeling of being measured and found wanting. The presentation was a huge success. The board loved the new branding. There were smiles, applause, handshakes. Eliza was beaming. Afterward, at the small reception, she made a point of seeking me out. "You nailed it, Daniel," she said, her eyes sparkling with genuine pleasure. They were blown away. I was blown away. "We nailed it," I corrected, smiling back. "It was a team effort." "Maybe," she conceded, a playful smile on her lips. "But your vision was the driving force. You should be incredibly proud." Later that week, after the dust had settled, an email from Eliza popped into my inbox. Subject: celebrate? Body: "Hey Daniel, now that we're not chained to our laptops 24/7, fancy grabbing a drink to celebrate a successful launch? My treat. You deserve it. Eliza." I stared at the email, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. A drink with Eliza? Outside of work. It sounded nice. Too nice? My mind, conditioned by months of walking on eggshells, immediately started to look for the catch. Was this a work thing? A friendly thing? Or something else? The thought of something else sent a jolt of panic through me. Was I ready for that? Was I just going to repeat the same patterns, fall for someone only to be disappointed, or worse, to disappoint them? The ghost of Trevor, though fainter now, still whispered warnings in the recesses of my mind. Don't be insecure, but also don't be a fool. I talked to Ava about it, of course. So, the awesome client you've been raving about, the one who actually thinks you're talented, wants to get a drink with you and you're hesitating? Ava raised an eyebrow, the unspoken, "Seriously?" hanging in the air. It's not that I don't want to, I explained, pacing my small living room. It's just, Eliza's great, really great. But after Melissa, I'm scared, Ava. Scared of misreading things, scared of getting hurt again, scared of not being enough. Daniel, Ava said gently. Melissa was one person. A person who had her own issues and projected them onto you. Eliza is not Melissa. And you are not the same Daniel you were back then. You've been to therapy. You've worked on yourself. You know your worth now, or at least, you're starting to. This isn't about repeating patterns. This is about exploring a new possibility. With someone who already sees you, Daniel. Not some idealized version of an ex. Her words, as always, cut through the noise. Eliza did see me. She'd seen my work, my process, my passion. She hadn't compared me to anyone. She'd just appreciated me. I took a deep breath. Ava was right. I couldn't let Melissa's shadow dictate my future. I couldn't let fear win. I sat down at my computer and pulled up Eliza's email. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then I started to type. Subject, celebrate. Body. Hey Eliza, a celebratory drink sounds great, and yes, I think we both deserve it. When and where were you thinking? Daniel. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. A small, cautious smile played on my lips. It wasn't a grand gesture, just an agreement to after-work drinks, but it felt like a step into a new beginning. A step towards something that might, just might, be incomparable. Our first date, though neither of us called it that, was at a quiet little wine bar Eliza knew, tucked away on a side street. The kind of place with exposed brick, low lighting, and a bartender who actually knew his grapes. It felt adult, calm, worlds away from the trendy loud spots Melissa had favored. I was nervous. More nervous than I'd been on a first date in years. My hands were clammy, and I'm pretty sure I rearranged the coaster on the table about 17 times before Eliza arrived. Old insecurities whispered at the edges of my mind. What if I say the wrong thing? What if she finds me boring? What if she too has a mental checklist I'm unknowingly failing? Then she walked in, a little flustered from rushing after a late meeting, a genuine smile lighting up her face when she saw me. And just like that, some of the tension eased. Sorry I'm late, she said, sliding into the seat opposite me. Last-minute crisis with a grant proposal. No worries at all, I said, meaning it. Gives me more time to pretend I understand this wine list. She laughed, a warm, easy sound that made me smile too. Don't worry, I'm fluent in Oki and robust. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about work, yes, but also about our lives outside of it. She told me about her passion for urban gardening, showing me pictures on her phone of the surprisingly lush tomato plants on her tiny apartment balcony. I talked about my love for old movies and my long-stalled attempt to write a screenplay. There were no awkward silences, no forced pleasantries. It was just nice, comfortable. At one point, I found myself telling her, vaguely, about my recent breakup. I didn't go into the gory details, the Trevor-centric nightmare. I just said I'd come out of a difficult relationship and was still finding my feet. I get that, she said, her expression understanding. Bad breakups can really do a number on you, make you question everything. There was no judgment in her voice, no prying questions, just empathy. It was so different from how Melissa would have reacted. Melissa would have either turned it into a story about how Trevor handled his past breakups with such stoic grace, or she would have offered unsolicited advice, subtly implying I wasn't handling it correctly. With Eliza, I felt heard, seen, not analyzed or compared. As the evening wore on, I found myself relaxing in a way I hadn't with a woman in a very long time. I was just Daniel. Not Daniel trying to be better. Not Daniel measured against an invisible yardstick. Just me. And Eliza seemed to like just me. There was one small moment of panic. We were talking about travel, and I mentioned a disastrous camping trip I'd once taken where everything that could go wrong did. I told the story with my usual self-deprecating humor. Eliza laughed. "Oh, that sounds like something my brother would do. He's hilariously inept when it comes to anything outdoorsy. He once tried to pitch a tent in our parents' backyard and somehow managed to set off their sprinkler system. For a split second, my internal alarms blared. Comparison. She's comparing me to her brother. Is that good, bad? Is her brother a loser? Am I a loser?" The old anxieties, the Melissa-induced trauma, flared up. I must have looked a little thrown, because Eliza's smile softened. "Hey, you okay? Did I say something weird?" I took a breath. This wasn't Melissa, this was Eliza. Honest communication. That's what Dr. Evans always preached. "No, not at all," I said, trying for a casual tone. "Just for a second there, it reminded me of something from my last relationship. My ex used to compare me to people a lot, usually unfavorably." I cringed internally, wondering if I'd overshared, if I sounded like damaged goods. Eliza's expression didn't change, except for a flicker of something, sympathy, in her eyes. "Ah," she said softly. "That sounds tough and really unfair. For what it's worth, Daniel, your camping story was hilarious and relatable. Not inept brother triggering the sprinklers relatable, just human." And just like that, the panic subsided. She got it. She didn't dismiss my feelings. She didn't tell me I was being too sensitive. She validated my experience and, in her own way, reassured me. It was a small moment, but it felt huge. It felt like learning to trust again, not just her, but my own ability to navigate a relationship without constantly second-guessing every word, every nuance. We started seeing more of each other. Dinners, gallery visits, ones we chose, long walks talking about everything and nothing. It was a slow burn, a gentle unfolding. There was no pressure, no expectation. We were two people getting to know each other, supporting each other's goals, cheering each other's small victories. She came to a small local exhibition where I had a couple of prints displayed. I helped her pick out paint colors for her living room. It was the little things, the everyday moments, that started to build something solid, something real. One evening, we were at my apartment. I'd cooked dinner, a simple pasta dish, no burnt garlic this time. We were listening to an old jazz record, the city lights twinkling outside my window. Eliza was telling me about a challenging project she was tackling at work, and I was offering some design-centric solutions. She was looking at me, her head tilted in that way she had when she was really listening, a soft smile on her face. And it hit me. Not like a thunderbolt, but like a warm, spreading glow. I was falling in love with her kindness, her intelligence, her humor, her genuine appreciation for who I was. Not for who I could be or who someone else had been. Just me. The thought didn't bring panic or fear. It brought peace and an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I saw was Eliza. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, that was more than enough. It was everything. A year. 12 months since the door had closed on my life with Melissa, and a new one had, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence, opened with Eliza. It's funny how time can reshape your landscape, smoothing out the jagged edges of past hurts, allowing new growth to flourish. We were at an industry awards night. Not my usual scene, but the Arts Foundation had been nominated for an award for the rebranding project, so Eliza and I were there, representing. She looked incredible in a deep blue dress, and I didn't feel half bad myself in a suit that actually fit, one that hadn't been subtly critiqued for not being Trevor-esque. As we were mingling, glass of champagne in hand, I saw them, across the crowded room. Melissa. And next to her, a man I instinctively knew had to be Trevor. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with that easy confidence that Melissa had always lauded. They were back together. A part of me, the old, insecure Daniel, might have felt a pang of something. Inadequacy? Regret? But as I looked at them, laughing with a group of people, I felt nothing. Nothing but a profound sense of relief, like I'd dodged a bullet I hadn't even fully seen coming at the time. Melissa spotted me. Her eyes widened slightly. She whispered something to Trevor, and then, an awkward inevitability, they made their way over. "Daniel," Melissa said, her voice a little strained. "Fancy seeing you here." "Melissa, Trevor, I presume?" I extended my hand. His grip was firm, his smile polite but distant. The man, the myth, the legend. In person, he was just a guy. The conversation was brief, stilted. The kind of forced pleasantries that make you wish the floor would swallow you whole. Melissa asked what I was doing there, a hint of surprise in her tone that I was attending such an event. I explained about the foundation's nomination. "Oh," she said. "That's nice." Nice? Her go-to word for things that didn't quite measure up. Trevor made some generic comment about the importance of good branding. I nodded, mumbled something equally anodyne. It would have devastated the old me, this encounter. I would have spent days dissecting every word, every glance, feeling small and insignificant. But now, I just felt detached. Almost like an observer watching a scene from a movie I'd already seen and hadn't particularly liked the first time. Eliza, sensing my discomfort, or perhaps just the general awkwardness, gracefully steered us away. "Excuse us," she said with a warm smile. "I think they're about to announce our category." As we walked away, she squeezed my arm. "You okay?" she asked softly, her eyes searching mine. I looked at her kind, intelligent face, at the genuine concern in her eyes. And I smiled, a real, unforced smile. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I'm great." And I meant it. Later that evening, the foundation didn't win the award, but it didn't matter. We were celebrating anyway, just the two of us, at our favorite little Italian place, a new favorite, one with no ghosts. "So," Eliza said, swirling her wine, "running into your ex, and the infamous Trevor. How did that actually feel?" I leaned back in my chair, considering her question. "Honestly," I said, "it felt like closure. Like seeing an old photo of yourself with a really bad haircut. You cringe a little, wonder what you were thinking, but mostly you're just glad you've moved on." Eliza laughed. "Good analogy, and your current haircut is much, much better." I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers intertwined with mine, a perfect fit. "It really is," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "It really, really is." The journey had been painful, bruising even, but it had led me here, to Eliza, to a love that didn't require me to be a carbon copy of someone else. A love that celebrated my quirks, championed my passions, and saw my worth without a single comparison. We started talking about the future that night. not in grand, sweeping statements, but in small, hopeful whispers. A trip we wanted to take. A ridiculous art project we wanted to collaborate on. The possibility of moving in together. It wasn't about filling a void or meeting an expectation. It was about building something new. Something uniquely ours. As I looked at Eliza, her eyes sparkling in the candlelight, I thought about how far I'd come. From a man riddled with self-doubt, constantly trying to measure up to an impossible standard, to someone who finally understood his own value. Someone who had found a love that was, in every sense of the word, incomparable. With Melissa, every day had been an audition. With Eliza, there was no measuring up to someone else's standard. We were creating our own. And it was beautiful. It was real. And it was, finally, just right. My emotional recovery felt complete. My confidence not a flickering candle anymore, but a steady, warm flame. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that this was just the beginning.